Hey guys, I want to read you a little bit of the essay that I wrote titled Unbelievable, the Story of Convicted Killer Darlie Routier. This is copyrighted material, so you know how that works. No reprints or electronic transfer sharing without permission from the author. There is a woman who has been sitting on death row since February 1st of 1997 for a crime she insists she did not commit. Her name is Darlie Routier. According to Darlie, on June 6th of 1996, while she was sleeping, an intruder slashed her throat, stole her panties, and fatally stabbed 2 of her children. According to the police investigation, there was never any intruder. 11 days later, Darlie was arrested and charged with murdering her children, Devin and Damon Routier. 7 months later, Darlie was convicted of capital murder and sent to death row. And 19 years later, the fundraisers for Darlie Routier continue, along with the claim that if only they can raise just a little bit more money, then surely they will be able to prove she is innocent. Most vocal in her defense is her own mother, also named Darlie, who has been active in raising funds for her daughter since the day her grandchildren were killed. According to one of Darlie's mother's co-workers who contacted me, on the very same day that the boys were murdered, she began to ask for money. At the time, the money was needed for expenses, even though the parents held life insurance policies on their children. Soon the fundraising efforts turned to raising money for Darlie's legal defense. And then when she was convicted, the fundraisers were held to help her with appeals. When Darlie lost her appeal for a new trial, the fundraisers became pleas for help in paying for testing, which will surely prove poor Darlie was wrongfully convicted. Through the years, the fundraisers, the interviews, and the books and documentaries on the case have multiplied. Darlie is innocent, her mother proclaims. She was unfairly targeted by the police. The prosecutors are liars. The nurses lied. The EMTs lied too. And of course, the police officers lied when they claimed that it was Darlie herself who murdered her sons. According to one member of Darlie's husband's family, Aunt Sandy, the judge took 16 naps during Darlie's trial. The family claims it was unfair to Darlie to have held the trial in Kerr County. And Darlie's mother-in-law, Cyrilda, perhaps the classiest lady in the family, scolded the jurors after the guilty verdict by telling them they got it wrong. To believe Darlie and her handful of supporters, you would have to believe that approximately 50 people conspired to do her in. You would have to believe that somehow in the first few minutes upon arriving at the scene, that the emergency responders spoke in some sort of silent code to each other and said, "Hey, I know. Let's frame her." You would have to believe that the intruder Darlie speaks of somehow magically appeared, then disappeared, without leaving any trace of his presence at the scene. You would have to believe that an intruder would have left behind a witness who could identify him. You would have to believe that an intruder decided to hand the murder weapon to. You would have to believe that Darlie walked behind the intruder as he slowly sauntered toward the garage after killing 2 little boys, then attacking their mother. Darlie says that's exactly what happened. According to Darlie, as she was walking behind the intruder, he dropped the murder weapon on the floor as he passed the laundry room and continued walking toward the garage. According to Darlie, before he dropped the murder weapon on the floor, he fatally stabbed her children. He removed her panties, remember, and then he slashed her throat. Darlie couldn't remember for sure whether or not she was sexually assaulted. Darlie couldn't remember for sure whether or not she struggled with the intruder. And Darlie couldn't remember for sure what the intruder even looked like. To believe Darlie and her supporters, you would have to believe that each and every juror was out to get her. You would have to believe that the news media was in on it from the start and that the reporters, the book authors, and the filmmakers were trying to frame her too. To believe Darlie, you would have to believe that the jurors found her guilty of capital murder based entirely on a video showing her just 8 days after the murders, laughing and singing and spraying silly string on her son's shared grave. In fact, the evidence clearly points to Darlie's guilt. The police officers saw it. The prosecutors saw it. The jurors saw it. And millions of Americans saw details of the case unfold on national television and read about it in the newspapers and also formed the opinion themselves that Darlie is actually guilty as sin. Yet even with the evidence clearly showing Darlie killed her children, nearly 20 years after being sent to death row, Darlie continues to collect money from her handful of supporters who for some reason simply cannot wrap their head around the facts of this case. Is it Darlie's fake Southern Belle drawl that reels them in? Is it the little girl voice that Darlie uses when she thinks it will suit her needs? Or could it be they are just so opposed to the death penalty that they choose to ignore how she so brutally stabbed her own children? Surprisingly, with all of the evidence pointing toward Darlie and with her story not fitting the crime scene at all, there are still supporters willing to funnel money her way.